So what are the things that directly impact brain health, and what are the foods that we can eat that will support brain health? You can change what you eat, so much so that you can drive your brain and your body to crave foods that are good for you, or at least better for you than the foods you might currently be eating. Some of the most frequent questions I get are about food and the brain. Everybody seems to want to know what they should eat and what they shouldn't eat in order to have peak brain function, to be able to focus and memorize things and so forth, and in order to maintain brain health over time, because nobody wants to lose their memory or have troubles with cognition. But today I really want to concentrate not on the things that modulate our overall health, but rather the things that mediate brain health directly, and in particular, how certain foods enhance brain function. Generally, when we think about neuron function and brain function, we default to a discussion about fuel, the fact that neurons use glucose, which is blood sugar, and that they require a lot of it. In some cases, they'll use ketones, which we will talk about a little bit later, especially in people that are following a low carbohydrate or ketogenic diet. But before we can even consider the fuels that neurons use in order to function, we have to talk about the elements that actually allow those neurons to be there and to stay healthy, what actually makes up those neurons. And that brings us to what I would argue is the most important food element for brain function, and that is fat. And that might come as a surprise, but unless one considers the water content of the brain, which is very high, a lot of our brain and a lot of the integrity of the nerve cells, the so-called neurons in our brain, and the other types of cells comes from fat. Fortunately, there are a lot of data now from really good quality peer-reviewed studies that indicate certain things that we can do, including certain foods that we should eat, and perhaps even some foods that we should avoid in order to enhance our brain function. And of course, when I say brain, what I really mean is nervous system function, because how we are able to move and remember things, etc., doesn't just depend on the neurons, the nerve cells that are in our head. It also depends on our spinal cord and the neurons that connect to all the organs of our body. So in general, there are two categories of things that are going to improve brain health from the perspective of nutrition. And the answer is the so-called essential fatty acids and phospholipids. Now, those are more or less the same thing, but I just want to make a very large literature very crystal clear. Essential fatty acids can include the so-called EPA variety or DHA variety. You hear about omega-3s and omega-6s. Most people are getting enough omega-6s from their diet. Not everybody, but most people are getting enough omega-6s. However, most people are not getting enough omega-3s in their diet to support healthy brain function in the short and long term. I've talked before about the benefits of elevating the levels of omega-3s in one's diet for sake of offsetting depression and for enhancing mood. And indeed, there's a wealth of literature now pointing to the fact that ingesting at least 1 or 2 or even 3 grams per day of EPA form of essential fatty acid can have effects, positive effects on mood and well-being that are at least on par with some of the major antidepressant treatments out there, but without similar side effects to those antidepressant treatments. And that for people that are already taking antidepressants, that supplementing with 1 to 2 to 3 grams of EPA essential fatty acids can actually allow a lower dose of antidepressant treatment to be used and still be effective. So that's depression, but just in terms of maintaining normal cognitive function in people that aren't depressed, the EPAs and omega-3s seem to play a very important role. But also, EPAs are found in chia seeds, in walnuts, in soybeans, and other plant-based foods. You can look these up online. Many of the foods that I listed off might be appetizing to you. Some of them might be unappetizing to you, or some of them you might be sort of neutral about. But it's very clear that eating foods that are rich in omega-3s and or supplementing with omega-3s to get above that 1.5 grams and ideally up to 2 or even 3 grams per day of EPA can be very beneficial for cognitive function in the short and long term. But again, I want to emphasize that you don't have to consume fish and animal products in order to get sufficient EPAs. You can get them from plants, but I do believe, based on the quality peer-reviewed research, that everybody should be striving to get a minimum threshold of at least 1.5 grams of EPAs per day, one way or the other. The general prescription that's out there in the literature, and I think is well supported, is to get somewhere between 150 and 180 minutes of cardiovascular exercise per week. If you choose to also use resistance exercise, that's great, but the 150 to 180 minutes minimum per week of cardiovascular exercise is crucial for heart health, and heart health directly relates to brain health because the brain consumes a lot of oxygen, glucose, and other factors that are delivered via the blood. So if your arteries are clogged up and you've got poor vascular supply to the brain in any region of the brain, your brain will suffer. So get cardiovascular health in order.